This is brutal as the Canucks' first prospects game leaves this organization with lots to figure out with these young players after a devastating game. But the night wasn't without its silver linings as far as some future Canucks stars are concerned. We're going to be breaking down all of that in this episode of Canucks Digest. But first, if you're part of the 57% of viewers who aren't yet subscribed yet and you want to stay up to date on all things Canucks, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss any of the episodes when they drop. And with that, let's hop straight into it, which is prospects game number 1. So the Canucks played their first prospects game, first of 2 this weekend. The first, and both of them being against the Seattle Kraken, I should say, against their prospect pool versus ours. And for the lineup for the first game, it was a really interesting lineup. Mark and I were talking a bit before the game and seeing how excited we were to see some of these lines in play, for particularly that first and second line where you had Vilmer Eriksson, Braden Coots, who we're going to talk about later on in this video, and Jonathan Lekkerimäki. So you have 3 top studs there as far as this Canucks prospect pool is concerned. And then you had Josh Bloom, Riley Patterson, and Gabe Chiaro in that second line. Another one of those players that made a big impact in the game. But unfortunately, the game was all for naught as the Canucks did unfortunately choke a 3-0 lead to finish with a final score of 5-3, and all of that coming in the second and third period, because the first period it was scoreless. But you guys wouldn't have known that first period was scoreless unless the Canucks were tweeting about it, because there was no audio on the game stream. I know a lot of you guys were seeing it on social media. You guys were letting them hear it, because for the first 5 minutes it was fixed on center ice, and then after that we were getting camera angles, but there was no score bug and there was no audio. So that was a little bit frustrating, especially when some people were watching the game trying to get familiar with some of these prospects, and this was really their biggest chance to kind of see them in action. It was a real shame that we weren't able to hear any of the audio. Maybe it was because it was pulled from a Kraken feed, I don't know. But when I tried looking on even the Kraken's website to find a feed with audio, could not find one there, as they were not even streaming it, and it was just on the Canucks, which seemed a little bit weird to me that they were streaming a Seattle Kraken stream, but it wasn't on the Kraken website to find one with audio. Maybe that's why they couldn't use audio. Who knows? Either way, it was terrible to watch it in that sense. However, it was still some highlights within the game, and that came with the first goal of which coming from a nice breakaway from Vilmer Eriksson in the second period to open up the scoring at 1-0, which was a really nice beauty to see, where he just broke loose. As soon as he broke loose and got ahead of that last defender, I had a feeling he was going to bring one home, and he absolutely did. And not too long after that, Gabe Chiaro hammered one home with a beautiful wrist shot. If you guys have been watching the channel for the past couple of weeks, you guys know that Mark has been really high on this kid, and he is the real deal in his eyes. So it's really nice that he was able to get a goal here. So you know Mark was at home cheering about that when he saw that happen, as this is one of his favorite prospects that we have on the team. But there was some other ones that did make an impact as well, as DPD passed to Poisson for a very nice goal, where it was a little bit confusing as far as who scored it, because there was a lot of pucks bouncing around there with deflections. Overall, DPD got a nice setup there, and DPD also got involved in a little bit of a scuffle there, where he was kind of chirping and beaking a little bit back and forth with the Kraken player, but that Kraken player was barking up the absolute wrong tree, because DPD is not somebody that you want to have on your bad side, because when that kid gets going, he is an absolute unit, whether it's physical or just trying to finesse you with the puck. He is going to be somebody that tries to make you pay no matter what you do. But the other thing as well, with the unfortunate thing with the game, was that forward Braden Coots, which is one of my favorite prospects that we got in the system, who we just got in the NHL draft this past year, will not return to the game, as he did take an early injury in the game earlier. So the Canucks tweeted about it. They didn't disclose what the injury was really, so we're going to get a follow-up on that tomorrow, so stay tuned for an episode on that. But overall, I wasn't too unimpressed with what I saw with the game overall, but there was some things that I did want to see really get improved upon. For one, it was the defensive. The defense did not hold up in that third period. They just completely fell apart. You got a 3-0 lead, and you can't bring it home for one more period. Even after that second period, they still had the lead. They were up 2 goals, 3-1. And then the third period, they just completely fell apart. Medvedev, he played solid between the pipes for the first 2 periods. There was a little bit of aggressive goaltending there in the early stages, where he was able to kind of salvage some of those, where the Kraken just could not corral the rebounds, or they couldn't corral the puck, and he was able to poke it away, so that aggression really paid off. So when it paid off really well, but sometimes it was a little bit risky, and he got very lucky that they did not shoot it on the net, or could not corral the puck, or that it got jammed loose by a Canucks player, or just by a redirect. So that's something where Medvedev is going to kind of have to rein that in. It's not like the OHL where you can just be aggressive, go outside the crease, and absolutely pick on people. It's going to be a little bit different in the NHL, so that's going to have to be an adjustment that he's going to have to make. Even throughout this year in the OHL, he's going to have to be aware of that and just try and bring that in to kind of hone those skills back to when he's training with the Canucks, or makes that move up to Abbotsford in the next couple of seasons, because that is something that we saw with Archer Shilovs, how he played a little bit of risky, aggressive goaltending in the playoffs. There was that one save that he made that was absolutely amazing. I'm talking about the NHL playoffs where he just came out and just absolutely made that huge hit and poke check. But within that, with Medvedev, you kind of have to watch out for something like that, where if he's starting those tendencies early, you don't want him to be too aggressive all the time, because that is a very risky gamble that when it pays off in spades, and it looks beautiful, and it makes for great clips and great highlights. But when it doesn't, you end up on the opposite side of that highlight spectrum, on the side that you don't want to end up on, where they add the Curb Your Enthusiasm music or something like that, and you don't want to be ended up on a meme. That is something where goalies have to watch for that, and you see a little bit more cautious goaltending as a result, especially where guys don't want to be put on a poster in the NBA, guys don't want to be put on a meme in the NHL by just absolutely getting danced on out of their crease or making themselves look ridiculous. So that's going to be something for them to watch. But overall, really strong game from Medvedev, despite the defensive failings in that third period that led to the collapse. It was very disappointing to see, especially with no audio. Watching it without the audio for those first 3 goals, it was great. And then for the third period, it was absolutely terrible to watch it, just because they just kept scoring and scoring and scoring, and the Canucks couldn't really get anything going. But overall, there was some interesting things and some lines that I definitely want to see more of. I really like the pairing of Ulriksson, Coots, and Lekkerimäki, even though Coots did get injured. So we're going to see as far as how that term is. He's probably not going to be back for the next game, but I do anticipate some changes coming to these lineups, or some other kind of prospects rotated in there, and as well as maybe changing up the defensive pairings. Mark was saying as well that Tom Willander and DPD could potentially be our third pairing in the regular season. I definitely agree that that could be something that we see at some point in the regular season, probably a bit later on when they're trying to make a playoff push, if Willander is that guy, because we know DPD is that guy. He's been great. He was great last year, and he's really got a lot to show for it, and he's got a very high ceiling as far as his potential. So you pair that with a prospect like Willander, who has a lot of hype behind him, that could be a very interesting tandem into the regular season with these guys on that roster, if they do so make it. I know DPD is going to make it, but Tom Willander, that's going to be the question mark if he's going to be that 6th or 7th defenseman reserve for opening night. So we should see what happens there. But overall, I think we're going to see that pairing at some point during the regular season. And there is some other ones as well that I really liked seeing. That third line was still pretty solid. Berard had some good chances there as well. And then you had that fourth line that really got something going there. Kirill Kudryavtsev, he played a solid game where I know that's a lot of people are kind of hyped on him and excited to see what he does. Sawyer Minio, that's another defensive prospect that's been really hyped up. Parker Alkos, going to be interesting to see what more he does. But overall, I wasn't blown away by this prospect game, like I said earlier. But again, there wasn't too much where you're just absolutely stunned at how bad the prospect pool is. They didn't play bad, but it does show that this Canucks prospect pool has a lot of potential. But it also shows what the kind of floor is at, where it was almost basic Canucks hockey, where a lot of fans, if you guys were watching, you saw them get to that early lead. You guys were all feeling yourselves. I was one of them. I thought, okay, cool. This is going to be a really fun video to talk about, where we just absolutely dog walked them. And then the third period happened, and it turned into Vancouver Canucks hockey like last season, where it felt very familiar, and it hit way too fast. In the preseason, already with stuff going wrong with the way that they had the stream going, and then with the blowing the lead in the third period, it just felt like we were right back in Canucks hockey, for better or for worse. But I'm so happy that we are finally getting Canucks hockey back, as this season is getting closer and closer to the start, with preseason right around the corner as it kicks off with the Seattle Kraken, no less, as far as as well as us having these prospect games against them. But what were your guys' thoughts on the prospect game? What were your guys' thoughts on these lineups and the final score? Were you guys already upset that we're back into the Canucks hockey of choking big leads? Or are you really excited to see what more of these prospects are able to bring in Game 2 tomorrow night? Let us know down in the comments below. But that's going to do it for this episode of Canucks Digest. I've been your host, Griffin. Take care.